Okay, chapter 10 in the book, Disinfection. First and foremost, what is disinfection? Well, it's synonymous with decontamination. Disinfection is the destruction of most microorganisms. Write that down for yourselves. Disinfection is the destruction of most microorganisms. And what does that mean? That means that it's safe to handle with bare hands. Is it safe for surgery? No. By the way, by surgery I mean cutting into human flesh and interacting with flowing blood. Other means of surgery include use of of flexible fiber optic endoscopes, which interact with intact mucous membrane, for which disinfection is perfectly acceptable. We'll talk about that later on when we talk about endoscopes. But today, since we're talking about just the disinfection is the destruction of most microorganisms. Where sterilization would be destruction of all microorganisms, disinfection is one step below. Make sense? Okay. So when we talk about disinfection, we're going to be talking about disinfectants. What exactly is a disinfectant? Well, if you turn to page 156, you will discover there's a green shaded area over there. Always read the green shaded area. In this particular case, the first thing they want us to know, what exactly is disinfectant. Okay, a chemical which kills most pathogenic organisms but does not kill spores and is not a sterilant. You know, I got to tell you, it's not true, and the book will contradict itself later, because when we talk about high-level disinfectants, it says clearly that if given enough time, a high-level disinfectant will sterilize. But ours is not to question why. Let me give you my definition of a disinfectant. Do you guys remember my definition of a detergent? Yes, no, maybe? Anybody remember what my definition of a detergent was? Come on. All right, don't go feverishly looking through your notes. A detergent was a medium that facilitates cleaning, right? Well, a disinfectant is a medium that facilitates disinfection. Just like a sterilant is a medium that facilitates sterilization. Always start with the word medium, medium. Okay, it is a medium. So disinfectant is a medium that facilitates disinfection. Quick side note. There is a difference between a disinfectant and an antiseptic. Disinfectant is used on an inanimate object, like a surface of an instrument or a table, while an antiseptic, which does the same thing, it destroys microorganisms. Not all, but a lot. And these guys disinfect on the not disinfect. They destroy microorganisms on a living organism. That's antiseptic. Okay, does that make sense? All right. So we fast forward a little bit to page 158. Green shaded area contains definitions of non-lipid viruses, lipid viruses, and then, different types of disinfection. Let's read the three different types of disinfection. First and foremost, we have, well, it doesn't matter where you start. High level disinfection, intermediate level, or low level. They start with high level. High-level disinfection is a process that utilizes a sterilant for a shorter contact time than that used for sterilization, and that kills all microbial organisms, but not necessarily large numbers of bacterial spores. Please don't try to memorize all this. Okay, look at it. Look at what it says here. High-level disinfection process that uses a sterilant. What does it mean, uses a sterilant? What did I say a sterilant was? Something that sterilizes. Didn't they just tell us that a disinfectant doesn't sterilize? You see what I'm saying? So some of these things in the book have to be read with a grain of salt. Okay, this is not cool, some of these things, okay? So there's high-level disinfection. If you look at page 158, you will find on it, this thing on top. I would concentrate on that, okay? And what does it say? It says, it goes by classification of patient care items and the kind of disinfectant that it uses, okay? Intact skin. If an instrument has to come in contact with your intact skin, you use a low-level disinfectant because your skin is a barrier that prevents us from getting sick. Okay? Mucous membranes, which use a high-level disinfectant. What is a mucous membrane? A mucous membrane is anything that lines a naturally occurring body opening. Mouth, nose, rear end, inside the penis, the urethra, the vagina. All these areas, naturally occurring openings into the body, are always pinkish red. Ever wonder why they're pinkish red? Because they're rich with blood. And they're always moist and gooey. Ever wonder about that? Well, it's a naturally occurring body opening. It needs to scan and it needs to look at all the things that enter the human body. What's responsible for preventing a person from being sick? Well, that's our immune system. Major part of our immune system happens to be blood, more particularly white blood cells, or leukocytes as they're called. That's not on the test, I'm just explaining it to you. So these areas, the mouth, the rear end, the vagina, the urethra inside the penis or in a woman, all these areas are pinkish red. It's not because they need to be beautiful, right? It's because they're rich with blood. If it's rich with blood and they're gooey and moist all the time, that means if something is gooey and moist, it traps the impurities that enter your body, and then the blood, which is right next door because it's pinkish red, it's because it's rich with blood, will feel the stuff that's trapped on the surface of these mucous membranes and will go to work killing them. Do you understand? So if we take our endoscope, which we're going to fish through the different, twists and turns of the human body, through a natural body opening, is going to come in contact with it, and we're going to do some minor surgery inside or inspection. Does it need to be sterile? Well, the answer is not really, because this is not sterile. And watch this. I just put this inside my mouth. Was this bottle sterile? No, but I should caution you, always at least wipe the top of the soda bottle with something before you put it on your lips. Okay? Apparently there were cases of rodent urine being left on these cans from a warehouse, and if you don't clean your bottle of beverage, not bottle, because bottles, as you can see, you close them with a cap, right? And this is supposed to be coming from a clean environment. But the actual cans, the tops may be dirty. Wipe the top. Wipe the top. Just a little public service announcement, because I care. Anyway, and sterile body cavity calls for sterilization. Okay, when you cut into the human body and you interact with flowing blood, which will spread disease throughout the body, it needs to be sterilized. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'll leave this to you to read very gently, and we're going to move to page 161. Okay, we're going to start talking about disinfectants. Okay, all disinfecting agents are broken down into families. Okay, the first family that they choose, page 160. The first family that we talk about are things called the quaternary ammonium compounds. Do you see that on page 160? All right, so quaternary ammonium compounds. Quaternary ammonium compound is anything that smells like ammonia. Household cleaners like Mr. Clean is a quaternary ammonium compound. Do we use any of that stuff to disinfect our instruments? Under no circumstances. We wash the floor with it. Okay? Quaternary ammonium compound, also known as a quat, tells you that right there, also known as quats, and they are also known, just like water, as wetting agents. Now, here's what it says, and I'm going to read it to you, and you're going to sort of highlight that, okay? Quaternary ammonium compounds, commonly known as quats, that's important, are low-level disinfectant, important. Most hospital personnel are acquainted with one member of this family, benzalkonium chloride. Okay, you can highlight benzalkonium chloride. Another member of this group is, forget it. Quats, and this is important, are cationic surface active compounds, also known as wetting agents. Highlight that sentence. Quats are cationic surface active compounds, also known as wetting agents. They lower surface tension of the solution, which allows greater penetration of the disinfectant into the soil. Since these compounds are cationic, they carry a positive ionic charge, and they are incompatible with soap, which is anionic, which possesses a negative charge. Okay, it's good for general information, but it's not important for the test. You know what? I give you my absolution from reading anything else about quats. This is anything and everything that will ever be asked of you on the exam. So we move on to the next one. Phenolics. On page 161 on the bottom. What's important here is that phenols are intermediate to low-level disinfectants containing phenol or carbolic acid. Stop. Highlight that sentence. Got it? May I continue? Okay. And now I want you to listen to this. Phenols are intermediate to low-level disinfectants containing phenol or carbolic acid, which has a long history of distinction and use. For example, during the 1880s, Lister used phenol in efforts to develop aseptic surgical techniques. Do you think that's important for us to know? I should mention to you that Dr. Lister is the name after whom Listerine is named. He was a great man, but we don't care about that for the exam. Page 162. On page 162 at the very top is a little table. It says, Summary of Phenolics. As a matter of fact, you can reduce this entire chapter by just reading these little summaries. Okay? So, you don't need to know everything. But I'm here to tell you that the most important part over here is, it says mode of action, meaning how does it kill? And it kills by penetrating cell wall and precipitating cell protein. Do you need to understand what that means? No. Should you remember what it says? Yes. So how do phenols kill? By precipitating cell protein. Then what you need to do, close the door when you go. Thank you. Disadvantages, advantages, you can gently read this. It's not going to be a huge deal on the exam. But uses, housekeeping, usage for walls, floors, countertops, and furnishings. Okay, so do we do anything with instruments with them? Now, there's all sorts of blah, blah, blah information that you can read. But having said that, I want you to understand what's important here. Second paragraph on page 162 about phenols. It says skin irritation and minor burns of sensitive skin and even skin depigmentation can occur after exposure to phenolic residues on equipment if it comes in close contact with patient's skin or mucous membrane. Okay, folks, I got to tell you what phenol is. Just so you know. Some of you know. Have you ever chewed dentine gum? Dentine. Do you know that funny smell that it has? Kind of like minty and kind of burns at the same time with, that's phenol. Phenol is a natural plant. They sell toothpaste made out of phenol. Okay? It's a natural thing. I'm not here to tell you that you should use, phenolic disinfectants, to spice up your life. No. But you should know what that smell is. Phenol is an interesting thing. When it dries up, it leaves a film on the surface. And it reactivates if you just wet it again. Okay? That's an important thing to kind of recall. Okay? But if you didn't wash things off properly, and you are allowing the patient's skin or mucous membrane to come in contact with that stuff, it's going to burn. That's what it says. Okay? Make sense? Skip the rest. Move on to alcohol, page 162. And here it says, both ethyl and isopropyl alcohol have good disinfecting properties. Many experts believe that 70% isopropyl alcohol possesses the most effective disinfecting properties. Stop. Highlight 70% isopropyl alcohol. Now, they say that ethyl and isopropyl alcohol have good disinfecting properties. As a matter of fact, alcohol has excellent disinfecting properties. There's only one problem with alcohol. You know what that is? It evaporates entirely too quickly. And the only way you can have good disinfection through alcohol is if it stays wet for 5 minutes. It doesn't stay wet for 5 minutes. And that's the problem, unless you have a whole pool of alcohol. And that becomes not effective. As a matter of fact, if you read this, it doesn't say anywhere, is it intermediate level, is it low level, is it high level? It doesn't say anything. It just says that it's a good disinfectant. Okay? And go to page 163 at the very top, where it says, it gives you that little summary table. It says mode of action, meaning how it kills. It denatures or changes the structure of proteins. You need to memorize that. In reality, you know just about everything there is to know about alcohol. But the reason they say that the 70-30 concentration of alcohol to water, 70% alcohol, 30% water, is important because water gets into the cell, because the cell is always hungry for water. So the alcohol molecule presents itself with a water side. So, yeah, I'm just a little drop of water. Would you like to drink, my friend? And the cell says, sure, come on in. But right behind that little water droplet comes the alcohol. And once it gets into the cell wall, the alcohol, destroys what's inside. Does this make sense? Next, page 163, halogens. Now, if you look up on top, we have halogen bulbs, right? But what you don't know is that the halogens are all the way to the right side of the periodic table of elements. If you ever look at the periodic table of elements, on the left side you have the superconductive metals, okay, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, cesium, all these things on the left, superconductive metals, first two columns. And as you progress to go all the way to the right, you have transitional metals, and we go from superconductive metals to transitional metals, and they become less and less conductive until we get to gases and noble gases. So we go from superconductivity to no conductivity. And on the right-hand side, you will find the groups which are noble gases, which are halogens, okay? And one of them happens to be chlorine. Chlorine is a gas. And if you turn to page 163, under family called halogens, the very first one is chlorine. And that's on page 164. Now, on page 164 at the very top, it says summary of chlorine. Mode of action: inhibits some key enzymatic reactions within the cell, denatures protein, and inactivates nucleic acids. Remember this. Highlight that. One thing that you must remember, and you will stop from here, is that chlorine is only used for treatment of water. You want to wash a toilet? Chlorine is number one. You want to kill stuff that's in the water? Chlorine is great. That's why we put it in the pools or drinking water in the tap. But I may have already talked about that, so I'm not going to kill myself discussing it. Okay? So that's chlorine. After chlorine, on page 165, we have one more member of the halogen family, and that would be iodophores. Think iodine. Okay, and iodophores, okay, which is another word for iodophore, as it says at the top of the page. Iodophores are buffered iodines. So you need to remember that iodophores are buffered iodine. That's going to be on the test for sure. Mode of action: poisons cells' nucleic acids, quickly penetrates the cell walls of microorganisms. Okay? Poisons cells of nucleic acid. This is, let's just say that it destroys the nucleic acid in the cells. Poisons cells of nucleic acid. A good one. Okay, and after that, we're on to these things called glutaraldehyde, then orthophthalealdehyde, and formaldehyde. Did you notice anything interesting about the words glutaraldehyde, orthophthalealdehyde, and formaldehyde? They all have aldehyde on the end. Very nice pickup. Excellent. What does that mean? Nothing to us. Okay? But you should remember that all these things, what I just said, glutaraldehyde, orthophthalealdehyde, and formaldehyde, all kill the same way, through alkylation, or making something alkali. Does that make sense? Okay. And so, formaldehyde you may have heard of. If you ever took a class of biology or anatomy, there's that smell inside that classroom. Ugh, yucky smell. It smells the same way as a funeral home. Right? Because in certain places here in the States especially, they like to pump dead bodies full of formaldehyde. So they can display them for a couple of days and they, don't decay. Nasty. Abnormal, but whatever. People like to go and watch a dead body in a casket all dolled up and etc. But it's pumped full of formaldehyde, so the body doesn't decompose. All the natural agents of decay that begin to eat away at the human body to turn it into the dirt that it was once have been destroyed. That's why the body doesn't decompose full of formaldehyde. Okay? And the same would happen if we pumped it with glutaraldehyde or orthophthalealdehyde. So we'll talk about those things in just a moment. So glutaraldehyde, formaldehyde, and orthophthalealdehyde, which are on these pages, are high-level disinfectants. That's the stuff we use on flexible fiber optic endoscopes. When we talk about them further, we will keep in mind these high-level disinfectants. Does this make sense? All right. Let me read to you a little bit of what's important on glutaraldehyde and so on and so forth. Glutaraldehyde is a high-level disinfectant, highlight, used for semi-critical devices such as endoscopes and ultrasonic probes used in radiology. Stop, highlight. I'm going to read to you the rest of the stuff, but I'm only going to tell you what's important to highlight, okay? So, conditions including times and temperatures for its use as a high-level disinfectants vary by manufacturer. Most of the time the temperature, and I'm not reading this to you, I'm just telling you off the cuff, temperature has to be over 30 degrees Celsius, between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius, in that range, okay? I would say that's temperature between 85 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? The time for sterilization is extended to 10 hours or more depending upon the concentration and the manufacturer's recommendation. Activation of the solution is usually accomplished by mixing the solution with a pre-measured activator. Highlight the last sentence. Activation of the solution is usually accomplished by mixing the solution with a pre-measured activator. Examples from real life. You may have found glue, epoxy glues, come in two tubes. Tube A, tube B. One is the glue, the other one is a hardener. It's, and together, separately, they're not a glue. Together, it's a super glue. Ever see that? Something that comes in two parts, mix it together, it becomes something else altogether. Okay, turn to page 166, keep on reading. Oh my goodness, look at all this information that we have to read. We don't need to know everything, but I will read it to you. Glutaraldehyde is compatible with a wide range of materials. Highlight. It kills microorganisms by alkylation. We already know that, but highlight this again. Glutaraldehyde is usually a clear liquid that turns green when activated. Highlight. And it has a sharp, pungent odor, which is typical of all aldehydes. Highlight, stop. Ready? Got it? Continuing. Keep highlighting. It is a strong irritant to the skin, eyes, and respiratory system, and vapor inhalation has been implicated as a possible cause of occupational asthma. Stop. That's important. Next paragraph, also important. Glutaraldehyde should be used in separate designated areas where control can be exercised over ventilation. Important, make sure you highlight. Traffic and proper equipment installation, operation, and maintenance. Rooms in which glutaraldehyde is used should be well ventilated. A minimum of 10 air exchanges per hour. You got it? And large enough to ensure adequate dilution of the vapor. What that means is it can't be in a tiny room. It has to mix well and disperse throughout the entire room. It's not on the test, but it should be at least 200 square feet. Okay. Local exhaust ventilation should be installed to control the vapor. Highlight that. I'm going to skip the next three paragraphs because they're not important, but the last paragraph at the bottom of the page I will read to you. Glutaraldehyde is compatible with materials used in many modern medical devices and can be used to process medical devices containing heat-sensitive materials. Okay? Though important, you can highlight it if you want to. It's not the key here. But here comes the important part. Most glutaraldehyde-based instrument sterilants are labeled for reuse for 14 to 28 days. That's an important factor. So glutaraldehyde is used from 14 to 28 days. But I want you to concentrate on number 14. 14 is a golden number. So what does this tell you, all of this? In reality, if you want to use high-level disinfectant, you just pour it into a tub and you soak things in it, usually for 12 to 15 minutes, okay, after having first cleaned it, and then you have to rinse it and rinse it and rinse it with water, and you keep using and reusing this stuff over and over and over again. You know where you find these, disinfectants that you probably never paid attention? If you ever been to a beauty salon or a barber shop, okay, all their combs are in this thing called Barbasol. Okay, they're standing in this green water solution or blue water solution, I forgot what the heck it's called. That is a disinfectant. Okay, from one customer to another, they don't want these brushes to go from one head to another without being disinfected. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so during the recommended reuse period, the concentration of the glutaraldehyde in the solution should be tested with test strips. Highlight that sentence. Every time you use, right before you use it, you dip the test strip in there to see whether it's good. It's the last paragraph on the bottom left side, halfway through it. So before you do anything, you dip the strip to test if it's good. Okay, this is called measuring the MEC, or maximum exposure concentration. Though it's not at this particular definition, you will see it. Okay. If the solution falls below its minimum concentration, recommended concentration, it should be discarded regardless of how many days the solution has been in use. So if on day 5, did I say maximum exposure concentration before? It's minimum exposure concentration, all right? All right, MEC. All right. If on day 5 your solution test strip came out and said that the solution is not adequate, dump the solution. And people say, but wait a minute, I put it in only 5 days ago. You said you can use it for 14 days. If it's no good, dump it. Conversely, if it's day 15 and you decide to say, well, why don't I save myself $1? Let me run a test strip. You put a test strip that says perfectly good. Hey, if it's day 15, or in this particular case, if with glutaraldehyde, if it goes to day 29, because a lot of times glutaraldehyde goes to 28 days, okay? If it still is good on day 29, pour it out. So it's maximum. Oh my God! You know, I'm losing my mind, but that's all right. That's neither here nor there. MEC stands for maximum effective concentration, or is it minimum? It's all right. We'll double check and we'll go. Disregard everything I said about MEC, except we test the MEC with a test strip. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's all right. Okay, so all right, I'm going to skip the first paragraph on page 166 at the very top. Second paragraph, beginning with the word glutaraldehyde. Glutaraldehyde fumes should be monitored for employee safety. The recommended maximum sealing exposure limit is 0.20 ppm, or parts per million, as a sealing limit, which must not be exceeded. Highlight that. Suitable eye wash units must be available for immediate emergency within 10 seconds travel time and or 100 feet distance. Highlight that. So what does that mean? That means that from the area where I can sustain a splash or any kind of an incident with that fluid, I must have an emergency eye wash station or one of those emergency showers within 10 seconds, which 10 seconds running time, they calculate is equal to about 100 feet. So either 10 seconds or 100 feet away from a place of potential exposure. Does that make sense? Okay, please highlight that. Skip the rest of the stuff in that paragraph. Next paragraph, and we're done with glutaraldehyde. It says glutaraldehyde vapors increase whenever the solution is agitated, such as when it's poured in or dumped out. Highlight that, and we're done. So the rule is, do not agitate the solution. Bless you. Again. And that's it for glutaraldehyde. Obviously, on page 167, you see summary for glutaraldehyde. Please read it over gently. Next, orthophthalaldehyde, or OPA. Even though it says it's relatively new, it's by far the most widely used. Bless you. But that's the last one. Okay. Orthophthalaldehyde is commonly called OPA. We can skip that it's a relatively new. We don't care about relatively new. What we care about is the following. OPA is different from glutaraldehyde a little bit. And I'm going to give you all the big points, but then we'll highlight it from here. It has no smell, but it does have toxic fumes. No smell, toxic fumes. You know, your gas inside the house with which you cook has a smell of rotten eggs, right? The rotten egg smell, or smell of sulfur, they put in there on purpose so you can smell the gas, because this gas has no odor. If it wouldn't have that odor of rotten gas, you wouldn't know that there's a gas leak in the house somewhere. Right? That's why they put that smell in there, so people know that something is wrong. Hey, I smell gas, but the gas has no odor. but it is toxic, and it does kill with carbon monoxide. So does OPA. OPA has the toxic fumes, but it doesn't have the odor that glutaraldehyde does. I mean, you walk in and you know damn well what formaldehyde smells like, but OPA you do not. So you still don't want to agitate the solution, and you don't want to be around toxic fumes, obviously. And how do we get toxic fumes? By agitating the solution. So that's the last thing you want to do, is agitate the solution. So let's read this. We're going to skip the first paragraph, and we're going to go to the second paragraph on page 167. Soak time is 12 minutes. I believe I mentioned that. 12 to 15 minutes, I said, right? So 12 minutes at room temperature, usually 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 20 degrees Celsius, and in a manual system, or 5 minutes at 77 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 25 degrees Celsius. Not exactly true, okay? Even though it shouldn't be less than 20 degrees Celsius, in the machines, it is usually above 30 degrees Celsius and between 30 and 40, as I already mentioned. But for the purposes of the examination, please remember these numbers, okay, in this paragraph. Last paragraph on page 167. Following immersion in OPA solution, the device should be thoroughly rinsed by completely immersing it in a large volume, for example, 2 gallons of water. Okay, important. Large volume of water equals at least 2 gallons. And then it says repeat this procedure twice with fresh water rinse. Highlight that. So it's not just once, it's twice at 2-gallon rinse. Okay? With fresh rinse water. Each rinse should be for a minimum of 1 minute unless otherwise noted by the device or equipment manufacturer. Discard the water down the drain after each use. Do not reuse the water for rinsing or for any other purpose. Turn the page. And here, in green shaded area, the answer to my prayers and all the screw-ups that I just made. Green shaded area. Minimum effective concentration, MEC. Okay. The paragraph above it says the concentration of OPA solution during its use life must be verified by use of OPA solution test strips to assure that the minimum effective concentration, or MEC, of 0.3% is present. The OPA solution may be used and reused within the limitations indicated above for up to 14 days. Stop. Done. OPA is over. And of course, as mentioned before, please read the table at page 168 on the very top, where it says how it kills, all the pros and cons. Do you need to know everything? No. Should you be somewhat familiar with it in case they slip a question? Yeah, just a little bit. But don't sweat it. Just the stuff that we highlighted and talked about, that's really important. Okay, that's always on the tests. All right. Formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is an interesting aldehyde out of the group because it can be low level, intermediate level, and high level disinfectant. Okay? Now, high level disinfectants is 8% formaldehyde plus 70% alcohol. Intermediate level is 4 to 8% formaldehyde in water, and low level, less than 4% formaldehyde. Okay, that's important. Now, here under formaldehyde on page 169 at the very top, right where I just finished reading this to you, there is an interesting paragraph. It says, since formaldehyde is not corrosive to hemodialysis equipment, it is used in concentration of 4% to disinfect dialysis systems. Highlight that. Dialysis is when they filter blood for people whose kidneys don't work anymore. we're almost done. There's one thing that I didn't see here, which I want to make sure. I think I didn't see something. I may have missed something. I know it's highly unlikely that I were to ever make a mistake, but you know, in this case I may have missed something. Well, last but not least in this chapter, thermal disinfection, which you find on page 172. And guess what? We don't even need to talk about it, because why? We already talked about it. Because thermal disinfection is simply the use of the mechanical washer, which uses high temperature, high pressure water jets to disinfect the instruments. And that's why it's called thermal, simply by high temperature. Now, one last thing that I do want to mention to you, and which I think should have been here, is something called peracetic acid, which is, should have been in this chapter, but for some reason I didn't see it. Peracetic acid, or PA, liquid oxidizing agent that is an effective biocide at low temperatures, used in a sterilization system that processes immediate immersible diagnostic and surgical instruments. Okay? Oftentimes they use peracetic acid. I read it on page 493, which is your glossary. Okay? I'm sure we'll come across it sometime. If you reread the chapter a little bit more carefully, you will find peracetic acid mentioned in there. Don't sweat it too much. Peracetic acid, you know what peracetic acid is? Vinegar. Okay? They use it a lot of times in conjunction with OPA. As a matter of fact, there's this thing called rapicide PA, which is orthophthalaldehyde in combination with peracetic acid. Okay? Leave it at that, and that's enough for now. I think this is more than enough information for today.